Okay, this is part 3 to cold weather clothing, proper layering, choosing the right clothing for cold weather, bushcraft, survival, camping, hiking, whatever the case may be. On the first two videos, I talked about the concept behind layering, the factors involved, layering versus just one big heavy insulated coat, the three general layers, which is a shell, an insulative layer, and a base layer. So in this video in part 3, I'm just going to get straight to the point, start talking about the layers. Like I said in the other video, unlike some videos, I'm going to start from the outside and work my way in because I already have the clothes on. So the first layer is it's the Outdoor Research Ferrocio jacket. It's a soft shell material. It's I think 75% nylon, 25% spandex. So it has some stretch in it. It's uninsulated, so it's just a layer of nylon with spandex in it. Doesn't have a fleece backing like some soft shells do. Soft shells are a very good type of jacket when you're talking cold weather clothing and a shell material, for a few reasons that I'll talk about. First off, they're not super loud. Okay, some of your normal rain or your normal winter coat, like just straight nylon, polyester, or just rain jackets or windbreakers, they're very loud, crinkly. Especially in cold weather, they get a lot more crinkly. And not a huge factor, but if you're walking around in the woods, you don't really want to sound like a plastic grocery bag flying around in the wind, and all that crunchiness and that swishiness to it. So that's one of the advantages of the soft shell material. Another advantage is it's very breathable, which we'll talk about later, but why that's important. Number 3, because of that spandex, it has some stretch to it, so you're not super restrictive. Okay, it has stretch, so the material's not just going to tear. Now, real quick, I want to talk about Gore-Tex rain jacket, or Gore-Tex rain jackets, the different waterproof materials for shell materials. Now, when I'm talking cold weather, a lot of the time, in my mind, I'm thinking below 32 degrees, anything below freezing. So say during the day it's 20 degrees or 15 degrees. Say it's the temperature it is right now. If I was to take snow and stick it on here, this isn't waterproof. The snow would just like sit there, most of it would just fall off. Okay. Under, say, 25 degrees, there's no need for you to buy a waterproof shell or to wear a waterproof shell. And there are some disadvantages to Gore-Tex and different waterproofing things. First of all, all the makers, they say their waterproofing is breathable and whatever. Most of that's BS. Okay, if it breathes just the littlest amount, they're able to call it breathable. That does not mean it breathes enough for you to be comfortable and for your perspiration and your water vapor to escape. Okay, so that's BS on their part. The problem with that in cold weather, Gore-Tex and all that, is some of your internal moisture might escape, but we're talking maybe 2%, maybe 5% of your total sweat and your perspiration. The rest of that is stuck, so it's saturating your insulating layers and just soaking you from the inside out. Okay, so that Gore-Tex originally prevents water exterior water from getting into your body, but in return, your body makes your clothes wet from the inside working out. Okay, so that's why, you know, I think it's really important. Shell material needs to block moderate amounts of water, moisture, because, you know, snow, some of it will melt. It also has to block a lot of wind entering, because that wind, a lot of times, if you can protect yourself from wind chill, it does greater for you than protecting yourself from the cold. What I mean by that is, you can just be wearing a shell, and your body heat will be building up inside there if there's not wind constantly blowing and literally blowing your heat away. So, I mean, you can have all the puffy down and the wool shirts and sweaters and whatnot, but if wind is able to just come in and penetrate all that insulation, those insulation layers are their utility and their usefulness is drastically reduced, because, you know, that wind is just blowing through, and any heat that those insulating layers are trying to slow down is just being stolen right out. You know, the wind's blowing through, and then when it leaves, it's blowing all your heat that you're trying to protect to keep you warm. It's just blowing that out with it. So, you know, I think it's really important to have something that's very wind resistant, you know, or windproof, which, you know, and then on top of that, something, this isn't a necessity, but something that if it does get wet, will dry quickly. So, I mean, cotton, they say cotton kills, but cotton as a shell material, you know, in my opinion, there's nothing all that much wrong with that, because first off, you're not using it as insulation. Second off, tight woven cotton blocks a lot of wind. And then third off, like we talked about, cotton does absorb moisture, but if you're talking in temperatures that the water will be frozen, cotton, it sheds snow just fine. But in the case that it does get wet, something made out of nylon or polyester, you know, like this jacket, dries really quick. It's also lighter than cotton. This shell weighs like 8 ounces, something like that, something crazy, insanely light. But I mean, it's durable, stretchy and whatnot. So, talked about the shell. Personally, I wouldn't recommend Gore-Tex or any type of waterproofing if you're talking about extreme cold. That area from, say, 25 degrees up to 50 degrees, Gore-Tex can serve a purpose, but the threat is still there about it still making you wet from your sweat not being able to escape. So, moving on. This is a Marmot Salon or something hoodie. And pretty much what this is personally, I don't like down, because once it gets wet once, it doesn't seem to really insulate as well and be as lofty as it was originally, and you are dealing with a lot of moisture. So personally, I don't like down. This is 80 grams of Primaloft Black, and again, it's moderately warm for its weight. On the same token, it's not super thick like a lot of down jackets are. The advantage of that is it's not all or nothing. It's not either having this on or having this off. This is just an alternative. It has a high warmth to weight ratio. It packs down really small. It's really lightweight, and it offers a lot of warmth for the weight and the space it takes up. And then underneath that, I have another insulating layer. This is an icebreaker heavyweight. It's like they're 300 gram, 320 gram or something like that wool. It's a 3/4 zip. Super, super warm. My hands are chilled a little bit, but even with this and my base layer on right now, I'm comfortable. Okay. Now I'm starting to chill off a little bit once I said that, but 100% wool. There might be a little bit of spandex in there, but pretty much all wool. The debate between synthetics and wool, I mean, to me doesn't really matter. They both have pros and cons. Fleece, you know, I like Under Armour products, polyester and whatnot. I like, and I wear those too. Something has to be said about the increased durability of those, just abrasion resistance compared to these wool products. These wool products, if they get wet, I mean, they take a long time to dry and they'll soak up a lot of water, and they'll still retain a lot of their insulated properties. Wool is naturally fire resistant, or it burns instead of melts, which can be an advantage if you're working around fires or high heat. Wool tends to be slightly bulkier. Wool, it tends to be a little bit heavier. So I mean, there's pros and cons to both. And I'm talking about as an insulative layer. And again, I have Primaloft products, I have fleece products, I have Under Armour hoodies, which are like polyester, and I have wool products like this, and I use them all. There's pros and cons to all. I can't really say one's better than the other, because, you know, some have advantages, you know, in some areas compared to others, and then they'll have disadvantages in other areas. So wool, synthetic, mix of everything, doesn't really matter. I tend to mix and match. You know, I'll use Primaloft on that. You know, I can wear that instead of another thick wool sweater, and that weighs less, you know, whatever. But something about wool, you know, I want to be wearing at least a little bit of wool. Something about it, you know, I just trust it more than synthetics, whether that's good or not. And then I won't take it off, but this layer right here is another wool. It's a long john top, and that's my base layer, and that's a lightweight. It's made by Icebreaker. I know what you're thinking, that wool against your skin's itchy. For some people that might be a problem. For me, it's not a problem. So when we're talking about base layers, and that's, I'm just going to get this much dress down. I'm actually going to start putting my layers back on. But when you're talking about base layers, your main competitors are polyester, polypropylene, silk, and wool. Cotton, I can't recommend for a base layer. So, base layers could almost be a video in itself. The long and the short of it is polyester. Okay, so Under Armour and the other big ones, most of those are polyester with some spandex in them, but they're still polyester. So you have silk, which isn't too common and can be kind of expensive, and it's kind of fragile. I've never really used silk. It might be the bee's knees, who knows. You have polypropylene, polyester, and you have wool. So polypropylene wicks, like on paper, polypropylene is the best at wicking capabilities. It's the best at I mean, it's literally, you know, it's a plastic. The military style, that big thick polypros and whatnot, they're great. They can be warm. Their biggest thing, well, there's a few problems. First one, I read about this in one of Cody Lundine's books, When All Hell Breaks Loose. One of the drawbacks about polypropylene is it has such good wicking capabilities that it actually makes your body burn more calories and produce more sweat to keep up with its wicking properties, which in cold weather can be a disadvantage if you're if you don't have a lot of calories to spare to begin with. Polypropylene I've never really been a fan of, because its other disadvantage is if you wear it more than 1 or 2 days in a row, it stinks. It stinks really bad, and it holds odor. And the other problem I've had is it's like the pilling. And if you put it in a dryer at too high a temperature, it's just fragile. If you put it in too high, they get crispy, they like shrink, they'll stretch back out. But, they've never really been, I've never really used them, and I don't like polypropylene. Polyester, pretty much you're talking Under Armour products, and a majority of base layers are made out of polyester mixed with a little bit of spandex to give them some form-fitting capabilities and some stretch. Polyester, in my opinion, is better than polypropylene. It is a little bit more durable, washing wise, abrasion resistance wise. Tends to be a little bit more expensive. Oh, and I should say polypropylenes tend to be the least expensive. Polypropylenes tend to be the right in the middle. Polyester, they're durable, they have good abrasion resistance, you can machine wash them, machine dry them, they're not really affected. They're popular, like Under Armour, all that stuff, but they also have the problem of holding odor. They're a little bit better than polypropylene, but if you wear them more than 2 or 3 days without washing them, you'll start stinking really, really bad. And I'm talking bad. And even when you wash them, even when you get them out of the dryer, they'll still have some of that odor. The laundry detergent just kind of masks that scent for a little bit. There's some tricks. You can soak them in vinegar and whatnot to, I forget, something with the enzymes or the bacteria or something like that. But that's one of their disadvantages. I do use polyester. I use like Columbia Omni Heat. Those ones, they're really good. They have the reflective side on the inside. They're durable, form-fitting. And I use them from time to time. But again, one of their biggest downsides is they just hold odor, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but I mean, if you're talking the end of the world type scenario, which I'm not, but I mean some of the people are into that, you're not going to be able to wash your clothes every other day. So I mean, eventually that's going to get to you and the people around you. You're not going to smell nice, and to me that's a disadvantage. Then you have wool. Wool, there are some drawbacks. Number one, some people, they're itchy against the skin. Number two, they tend to be the most expensive. Number three, they're the worst at wicking. They'll soak up a lot of their sweat before they start wicking it to the outside. And related to that is, as they soak up sweat, they tend to like sag and get heavy and stretch and whatnot. But one of their advantages is they don't hold odor. They're actually, I don't know the science behind it, but they're naturally slightly antimicrobial. You can wear them for a week at a time, 2 weeks at a time. I wouldn't recommend that, and they might be, crispy and crunchy and whatnot from your sweat and the salt that's impregnated in the wool, but they won't really stink. They'll just kind of smell like normal clothes. That's one of the chief advantages of them. On top of that, they are fire resistant. So, I mean, you don't know what type of disaster you'll be in, but the idea of having clothes that can melt against my skin, it doesn't really attract me. Is that something to majorly worry about? Not really, but the threat, again, is still there. I think I'm going to come back for part 4 and just kind of wrap up everything, add some tidbits, explain a little bit more.